Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Everything iSTAR. Today, our expert panelists will delve into many topics related to our iSTAR door controller portfolio, from the power of the iSTAR Ultra door controller and how to upgrade legacy panels, to a sneak peek at the newest iSTAR family member coming soon, iSTAR Edge G2. Our panelists today are Rick Foke, Director of Product Management, and Greg Hollenbeck, Senior Product Manager of Hardware. We're also joined by Christina Jin and Paul Chasen, both Regional Sales Managers for Software House. I'm just going to go through a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. Phones are muted to prevent any background noise. The webinar is being recorded, and a link will be sent to all attendees after the webinar. And our panelists will answer questions at the end of each section, so please feel free to add any question in the question box on the right of your screen. I'm going to now turn the webinar over to Christina Jin to say a few words.
Thank you, Carol. Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to personally thank you all for attending the webinar today, and hope everyone's staying healthy and safe in these enduring times right now. And now I'll turn it over to Rick Foke, the Director of Product Management. Rick?
Thanks, Christina. And again, hi, I'm Rick Foke, Director of Product Management for the Software House portfolio of products. We're based here in Westford, Massachusetts, outside of Boston, Mass. And I'm joined here by Greg Hollenbeck, who works for me as the Senior Product Manager for the iSTAR hardware line. Okay, so I guess we're ready to get going, Carol?
Yes.
Okay, well, great. Here's our quick agenda for today. First, I want to start off with a few, I promised only a few slides on Software House, and then get right into it. You know, go through memory lane here with the older panels, how to upgrade, why do you want to upgrade to the Ultra, and then a sneak peek at the next panels. And finally, we're going to end with a little overview of the fairly new touchscreen terminal. It's about a year old now, but just reaching its ramp up, if you will. And again, questions, please keep them coming. This is the second session of the Everything iSTAR presentation. Last week we had about 35, 40 questions. So let's see if we can try to beat that number this week. Okay, here's our brag sheet. You know, you guys all know Software House, right? We're consistently in the top systems providers in the world. You know, basically in the top 2 in market share. We do have a ton of systems installed, and that's why the panels become so important, because all those installed systems eventually need to upgrade their hardware, right? I mean, who knows how many DPCs are out there even, or the older APCs. You know, we want to keep our customers happy and up to date. Okay, and that's why our philosophy of no customer left behind sometimes gets morphed into no panel left behind. Okay, because the hardware is such a critical part of your system. It's the installed infrastructure. Okay, and to change it out en masse is not a good thing. Okay. Again, you know, one of the top market leaders in access control here, and here's why. You know, besides our embedded hardware that's renowned for their reliability, the performance, the system itself does scale. You know, our testing goes up to 200,000 doors in a single enterprise architecture. So we can handle whatever our customers throw at us. You know, we do multiple client testing with web, with mobile, with the traditional clients. Our integration platform, it's been out about 10 years, and we're up to 200+ integrations between fire and visitor management and wireless locks, you name it. People want to integrate with a secure system. Okay, and as far as our distribution strategy, what's really helped us over the years is the fact that we don't sell to everyone. We sell exclusively to trained, certified channel partners. Okay, we maintain that set of partners throughout the whole life cycle of a project. Okay, and it's really helped us out. You know, these partners of ours really do a great job for us. They provide the feet in the street to help our systems get installed in the best way possible here. So anyway, we're going to focus on, you know, this fifth bullet here, the iSTAR embedded controllers. Okay. And what makes the iSTAR such a great part of an access control system, a secure system, is the fact that it's all done in one place, right? You know, we develop and test the hardware, the iSTARs, the firmware in the iSTARs, and the secure software all in Westford, Massachusetts, right? You know, call us, you know, old-fashioned, but it does help when everybody is in the same place, you know, collaborating, testing, you know, working together. Obviously, our office is in a work from home situation right now, but boy, you know, it still pays to have the teams in the same place, you know, doing the same work and guaranteeing, you know, a really finely tuned system. Okay, as far as performance, reliability, it really helps out to give our customers that peace of mind. Okay, over on the right here, you see a little picture of one of our test labs. Those are our towers. You can see all the iSTARs mounted and wired up, and you know, when that test lab is cranking, it is so noisy in there with inputs and outputs clacking away, you know, simulated card reads happening. We actually test our iSTARs up to 25 transactions per second per panel. Okay, that's almost like one transaction a second per reader, right? I mean, it's not, you know, practical in the field, but, you know, we try to, you know, crank it up and break it. Okay, so yeah, just be assured that everything goes through a lot of testing. So again, a lot of questions have come up over the past few years about our older panels, the APCs, APC 8Xs, and even the iSTAR Pros now have reached their end of manufacturer status. So the first question is, what happens if something goes wrong with those panels? What's the deal? Okay, so I want to go through our support and maintenance policies first. Here's a lineup of the older panels. I started with the APC 8X, which we introduced in 1995, so that's a good, 25 years ago. We had the APCs before that, for those that are have a few gray hairs like I do. But the APC 8Xs really took off in the late 90s there, and they finally were retired or end of manufacture in 2017. So they had a really great run there. We picked out a lot of good standard components for that panel. Now, iSTAR EX came along in 2006, again retired in 2017. That was our 4-door expandable to 8-door panel. That was the first to have AES encryption to satisfy the government's encryption standards at the time. Okay, and here's our flagship, the good old iSTAR Pro. You know, this was a workhorse. It was introduced in 2004. It had a nice 15-year run. It had 8 or 16 door models. It had wall mount or rack mount versions for mechanical. And again, this was the flagship product for years. There's so many of those in the field that you know, we do still, you know, do firmware updates and critical patches, you know, on that panel. Okay, but the point here is that, okay, these aren't manufactured anymore, but we still offer communications to these panels on the Secure 9000 front end. So here you go. Here's our maintenance policy for hardware. Okay, it starts off with an announcement to the field. Okay, at least 2 months ahead of time. We try to do a little longer if we can. We'll announce, hey, here's the date. Here's when it's going to be, you know, end of manufacturing for a certain panel, right? And that end of manufacturer date is when our factory stops producing the panels, right? But the end of sale, which is the next row down here, is when we burn through the stock. So we might end the manufacturing, might take us a year to burn through stock, like it did for the APC. okay? We actually had a year's worth of stock. We really did a few really big batches there at the end, right? Even with the Pro, it took us 8 months or so to burn through the stock. And when we do that, the end of manufacture, we actually run a separate batch of boards, and we designate those boards for service use only. So even though we're not taking any new orders for panels, we still have new boards available just for service advanced replacement usage, okay? And then once we end of manufacture, we start a 5-year minimum countdown for end of support. And this is when we, we'll stop, taking technical support calls. Although, to be honest, we'll still take your call. Okay, we'll try our best. We have some very experienced guys in tech support that, can answer questions on, I don't know, Secure One Plus, for example. So we'll still do our best, but we will stop the firmware patches and the repair services after that date. So for the Pro, still have a pretty good timeline here through April 2024, for the formal support. Right. And finally, like I mentioned, on the Seeker 9000 front, we still continue to support those panels. We still have the driver for the APC that's available when you install Seeker today. Okay. We'll still talk to the iSTAR EXs and the iSTAR Pros in various cluster configurations through the 9000. So, this is one of our selling points. We pride ourselves on putting the extra effort into maintaining that backward compatibility and that continual support for these, older panels and in these situations, right? Because at the end of the day, our customers, they don't want to change out hardware every 5 years. They want to, buy something and have it last and get their money's worth out of it. But on the other hand, maybe it is time to consider a migration from existing panels that are in the field. And we have had a lot of interest, a lot of customers take us up on it. And it basically falls into two different reasons that really drive the upgrade. One is the IT standards that are now required by various companies exceed the existing technology, right? We all know that cyber is such a big topic these days. You hear about breaches and vulnerabilities at every twist and turn, it seems like. So, that might be a very compelling reason right there just to upgrade to the latest hardware. The other reason is more fun, right? And that's because you're getting some nice new features in the new panels, okay? And I'll go through some of those features that are only available in the Ultra line and beyond that might make it a good argument to upgrade the panels. So on the cyber side, here's sort of a quick summary of why you would want to, upgrade your hardware here. We'll start with the high security encryption aspect of things. On the network, you really have to have AES 256 encryption. That is the de facto standard today for symmetric encryption. On the asymmetric side, the key exchange part of it, we do offer custom keys, custom certificates. We do actually we do ECC encryption now for the key exchange, which is again like the highest NIST standard, and we're up to TLS 1.2 for that authentication protocol now. Okay, in fact, some customers are forcing us to make sure that TLS 1.0 and 1.1 are turned off. And that's part of their cyber standards now. If you do want to monitor the units via a separate network management platform, that's great. Turn on SNMP. It actually comes off by default. The web diagnostics browser is now protected as well with TLS 1.2. And stuff that we take for granted is actually very important, like the fact that we use very low bandwidth on a network, right? We have a fast personnel download feature where, if you have one person added at a time, great, we'll send it down one at a time to the panels. But let's say we see a big import of 1,000 personnel records coming in. Secure is smart enough to stop the downloads of onesie twosies, pause until the import is all done, and then concoct one big file for each controller and just whiz it down there, to get it up and running. So it's smart enough to know how to operate on the network and conserve bandwidth. Okay, here's one thing that you might not have been aware of. Due to a recent California law and good common sense, I guess, when you boot up an iSTAR now from the factory, the first thing you have to do is change the password. Okay, they don't want any default passwords in California, and it's actually a good thing for all of us. So we'll see that with iSTARs now. iSTAR Ultras will force you to change your web password. So let's take a look at these Ultras that I keep talking about. Okay, we have two models. The first is the Ultra, okay, iSTAR Ultra. You'll see it here. It's a full 32 reader, 32 door unit. We have 16 readers supported through 2 ACM boards, right? Here's ACM1, ACM2. What's nice is that these ACMs offer not just dry contact relays, but they offer embedded lock power management. So you can actually source voltage out of each relay to power the lock directly. So you don't need any interface boards or patch wiring to separate relays to manage your lock power. Okay, and those relays are socketed, right? If you burn out a relay, that's fine, just pop in a new one versus taking the whole ACM out of service and setting it back for repair. Okay, and besides the wired locks like the iSTAR Pro, we do support wireless locks in the form of Schlage and Aperio locks. You can really expand out your system in a lot of different ways. Okay, now we do have a brother to the Ultra, and that's called the Ultra SE. This is a purpose-built design meant for iSTAR Pro upgrades, right? So the only difference between the Ultra and Ultra SE is that ACM. It's the same exact GCM board, same firmware, same board, but the ACMs in the SE are now smaller. In fact, they're the same exact size as the iSTAR Pro ACM to make that mechanical upgrade that much quicker. So it's ideal for the upgrades, obviously, and it's also good for jobs where, boy, the wall space is really small, right? You need a smaller footprint on your controller, or where the lock power is provided by others. You don't need that extra ACM feature. Okay, but either way, you still get all the firmware features of the Ultra family. Here's a little close-up of that Pro versus Ultra SE hardware. So on the Ultra SE, you can see instead of a single 10 megabit port, you get dual GigE Ethernet ports. Okay, this is fairly unique in the industry to have GigE Ethernet with a UL 1076 listing. That's fairly hard to get. It is a dual core processor on there, so there's no more issues with shift changes at factories and the controller backing up a little bit. This thing is blazing. On the ACM side, we did some nice improvements. Again, the socketed relays. We have a USB cable now between the boards, so you can stretch out the board placement if you want to in your own custom enclosures. And we improved the power budget, so you can, if you want, do 8 RM readers with some I8s and R8s, all managed from that one ACM board. So some really nice improvements here on the ACMs, but it is the same layout, the same connectors. So you just pop off the Pro and pop on the connectors onto the SE ACM. Okay, I don't know, Carol, do you want to pause? Any questions on the hardware, or do you want to keep going?
Sure, I have a couple of questions here. This person has a site with 2 buildings. that has a JCI RDR2S and a CK721 board with the P2000 LE software. The customer wants to upgrade. Should I go with the newest JCI IP boards and latest P2000 software, or do I rip and replace and go to new secure equipment and software?
That's a good question. There's a few options there. First of all, the P2000 software is retired. There's no more patches or enhancements to that software, so it would be good to propose an upgrade to the Secure 9000. We do have some interfaces to the older CK panels available. It just depends on the features that the customer needs. Like the CK panels don't give you OSTP. They don't give you the anti-passback features that the iSTARs do. So you just have to kind of take a look, at the specific features that are needed.
Is continued support part of the current service agreement?
The SSA. Yeah, with Software House, our SSA, it applies to the secure software, but it really encompasses your system as far as tech support. Now, hardware repairs are just considered individually, right? We don't offer hardware warranty, if you will, beyond the 5 years. But hey, 5 years is pretty long, to be honest. I mean, again, that's one of the best in the industry, for hardware warranties. But yeah, the SSA covers support, for the system, if you will.
How many doors max for the iSTAR Ultra SE?
Good question. The Ultra SE supports 32 readers. So if every door has one reader, then you get 32 doors. If you're doing entry-exit, then that obviously gets down to 16 doors. And of that 32 reader count, only 16 readers can come from these ACM boards, like the Wiegand or the OSTP. The rest of them have to come from either wired or, wireless locks or IP ACM Ethernet door modules to expand it. So, okay, is that enough for now? We'll keep going.
Sure.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the firmware features that you get from the iSTAR family. So here's a nice handy chart that I put together. You see the APC, the Pro, the EX, and here's our Ultra and Ultra SE. So again, it's the same firmware, whether it's a Ultra or an Ultra SE that you're talking about. So we talked about reader support, we talked about wireless locks, IP ACM Ethernet door modules give you a nice flexible way to expand on the network from the I/O point. We'll talk about OSTP and a few of these other firmware features here. We see all the yes green lettering in the right-hand column. So basically, this is our platform. All the new features and enhancements and customer feedback. It's going into this family of products here. And one thing I'll say on this last row, if you don't have to, please don't go up to 1,000 clearances per person. Just asking for trouble. You can see the progression over the years. Okay, 40 per APC, 150 on the iSTARs. We did the 1,000 for a certain telephone customer that had 1,000 remote sites. Each site was a separate clearance, and some people had to have access to all the sites, right? So there are some use cases for it, but boy, it's it's not what you want to do in every single job. So here's a feature that came out, I think about 2 years ago. It's called Expiring clearances, and this one will really help keep the management of your system low. Basically, before expiring clearances, each clearance, it has a start and a stop date and time, but that's for the whole clearance. You couldn't individually control the clearances start and stop time per person. So if you had a different time frame needed, you had to make a whole new clearance to give that out. Well, now, the expiring clearances, if you go to the person's personnel record, you'll see 2 new columns here, start date and end date. That is just the date for that person's instance of the clearance. So I can give out the, what's this one called? Barn door. Someone's being funny here. I can give out the barn door clearance to one person all the time, but a second person has the same clearance, but only for this week or the next 2 weeks coming up. So right away you can see how you can reduce the number of clearances needed in your overall system. And that has been a complaint over the years of systems that have just runaway clearances. Just there's so many clearances in the database that it's just overwhelming. So yeah, please take a look. That's a great feature for larger systems especially. Random screening, it's not for every door, but boy, it's nice when you need it. If you have a door that needs special vetting. Okay, this actually came to us from the diamond mines in South Africa. You can have an event triggered when the random screening is activated, so a strobe can go off or some other lockdown can happen and the person can be escorted over for whatever extra screening there. Okay. And then here's one, we're calling it advanced two-person rule. It's basically the idea that you can set up a door for every access grant to require 2 separate people. Okay, it's not occupancy rules, it's just a simple, hey, for this door I need 2 card swipes within 10 seconds from 2 different people. It's a nice 2-man rule set up. In fact, you can have it so that one person has to be from group 1 and one has to be from a different group of people, okay, to really, get it more detailed. Okay, the benefit here is in some cases you don't need exit readers, for the occupancy controls, right? Because you're just doing it on card admits into a certain space. Okay, so let's move on. The last feature here I want to talk just a few seconds on is OSDP. We'll probably have a whole separate webinar at some point on it, but just, be aware that it's out there. It is a nice 2-way encrypted communications protocol between readers and other field devices and control panels. So it gets away from the Wiegand vulnerability. It gives you built-in tamper, no com. You really have a nice view of what's happening at the reader using the OSDP, and that's standard on all iSTAR Ultras. Ultra, Ultra SE, the IPACM has it, and most every new job that goes in is looking at OSDP for the readers. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I convinced you to migrate. Now let's look at a few details on how to do it. Let's say you have an older APC. It's doing fine. It's working away, but it's time. You want to get onto the network. You want to do expiring clearances. So great. We do have a mechanical adapter plate available, so you can take out the APC boards and put in this plate, which gives you the standoffs for the Ultra SE boards, right? The GCM and the ACMs. In fact, it will support a second ACM, so you could expand your APC into a 16-reader panel. One caveat, as you do the engineering on this, be sure to consider the power supply and what power you might need in your new controller. Some of the older APCs only had a 3-amp power supply that was offered. Okay, on the pros, it's a little easier. The ACMs fit already, right? So all we need to do is have a adapter plate for the GCM. And you see it here, okay, with the little standoffs available. And with the Pro, we actually have some kits made up. So there's a kit for an 8-reader setup, right? It gives you the adapter, the GCM, and 1 ACM. Then we have a separate part number for the kit with the 2 ACMs. And yeah, there's some discounting here as well. These kits are a little bit less than if you buy the boards separately. Okay, so that's the hardware aspect of it. Okay, on the software side, well, the Pro is a different object type than an Ultra SE. So instead of having to reprogram all of your Pros from scratch, it developed a separate utility to convert them for you. And it converts all the panels in a cluster, okay, and all the associated objects. So you basically don't lose any event programming, you don't lose any graphic map icon programming, you don't lose any history. If you reprogrammed all your panels from scratch, they'd actually be different doors. The history wouldn't be quite lined up. Well, here, your history is maintained with the same door name, throughout. Okay, so yeah, it's a great little tool. You just have to know where the wiring is on your RM ports. Okay, because in the Pro, the RM field buses were all kind of a party line onto the same panel. Okay, but once you get it going, the actual conversion just takes a minute or so. And there's one caveat here in that you do need to shut down the Seeker 9000 iSTAR driver during that conversion process. Okay, so you have to just plan that work, during off hours. Okay, and pause for a few questions, Carol.
Yeah, we have a couple. On the expiring clearances per person, does the clearance automatically get removed from the record, or is there a query to find those and then remove them from the records?
Good question. We actually do automatically take away that clearance. I believe there's a nightly automatic cleanup process that Seeker has, and we will remove those if they're not needed anymore. Good question.
How many OSDP chains per ACM?
Yeah, on OSDP, the limit is still 8 readers per ACM board. So you have a choice. You could do, 1 reader per port, right? Since there's 8 ports, or you could choose to start daisy chaining them. Each port can actually go up to 8 addresses on OSDP. So you can mix and match. I'd lean towards having them separated. That's for better serviceability.
And one last question, is the conversion process reversible?
Good question. No, it isn't. So I would take a backup before you do the conversion. Okay, the conversion actually, it changes the, the object types, but it keeps the same GUIDs, if you will. So yeah, just take a backup.
Actually, another question just came in. One more. Is there additional information available for the iSTAR Pro to iSTAR Ultra SE conversion tool, a detailed playbook?
Yeah, we do have a document that I believe gets installed with Secure. That conversion tool gets installed in one of the directories under server components. And there's a little PDF file there to tell you how to use it. There's some screenshots. Check out that first. Okay, well, great. So we've covered the old panels. We've covered the current panels. Now it's time to give you a sneak peek at the new panel coming out later on this summer. Greg, are you ready to go?
I am.
Okay, take it away. Over to Greg.
Thank you. Well, we're really pleased to announce that we will be launching in Q3 this year the new Edge G2. So you'll notice it looks very similar. We'll talk a little bit about the features and some of the security aspects of it, and its securities and its booting aspects. But for the most part, we're using a Linux-based software. We're going to support OSDP, of course, clustering, I think one of the biggest things is the memory upgrades and some of the power changes that we have placed on and inside the board. We're going to support up to 1 million card holders per Edge unit. And we'll get into the details about some of the additional hardware changes that we've made. Some of the biggest changes, of course, are embedded security or cybersecurity aspects. So the TEE. So this was kind of mandated in the industry as well as from above with JCI. So we've kind of moved into these new options and these new cybersecurity pieces. So next slide shows a kind of a graphical image of what is inside the operating system and inside the applications, the trusted piece and the client pieces, and how each parts of the cybersecurity works and how they talk to one another and how they are segmented from each other. So this is really, allowing us to have, a secure manufacturing, and we'll actually the next slide shows us a couple other pieces as well. So all of this is done from inception of designers from manufacturing. So once it's built, it's unique to itself and unique to you. So the next slide shows the secure manufacturing aspects, as well as the secure boot aspects and the secure updates. So now what that means is we're not just going to take updates from anything. We have to make sure that it's a trusted site to accept those updates. And then every time it's booting up, and it's authenticating every time. So as well as we're doing some additional backups during boot up, and we're doing some additional things that were kind of scheduled aspects in the original Edge are now default pieces in Edge G2. Let's move on to the next slide.
Yeah, one more thing, besides the trusted execution environment, there's other things we're doing on the Edge G2 as well that are for cybersecurity purposes, like simple things like we're taking off the console port. We're taking off the JTAG test port from production units. And at first, our tech support guys were having heartburn when we told them that. Like, hey, you can't do that. What are we going to do for troubleshooting, this and that? And they said, well, you have to balance things. And then we said, well, how many times have you actually needed to have a person plug into the console port in the field in the last 5 years? And the answer came back, twice. So you'll see some changes like that, but simple changes, but they're necessary for cybersecurity.
Not that we won't have the options for diagnostics moving forward, and the options for, sending out a very specific Edge board to your site to do specific diagnostics and pulling those things in still too. So those options are there, but they're very specific board layout to us, I guess is a good way to put it. So I guess one of the biggest changes that we have is we're only going to offer the 4-reader solution now. We're no longer going to offer a 1 and a 2-door solution. You'll notice that the layout is very similar, although turned and twisted here, but same display, basically in the same location. PoE Plus module will look exactly the same as we have today. So you'll see that. What's interesting is that we will also offer a PoE Plus board that will be available probably early 21. So that'll be an option board that it will be in kind of phase 2, as well as the Bluetooth Wi-Fi board that is kind of new up in the middle of the board up top. That as well will be an option board, and we're looking at probably late 21 for that option. So some of the key things that are changed, you'll notice that we have 2 full duplex RS-485 ports, plus 2 regular 485 ports, half duplex. So the 2 on the left side are half, and the 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom is the 485 full duplex. Of course, we still have our Wigan inputs and our outputs. The outputs, of course, are both dry or wet. 4 outputs, 4 inputs, 8 inputs. We're going to have the ability for 12 or 24 volts. I already talked about the PoE and the PoE++. Some of the kind of the really neat features as well is we'll dual Ethernet cards or Ethernet ports on this, both of them GigE. And you'll see those on the bottom left-hand side. And then other than that, really you'll see that the edge is formatted exactly the same as the current edge. So when we move forward, we're going to have a direct replacement plate, you know, basically pull and play, plug and play, pull and play, however you want to say it. So the next slide gives you a little more of a kind of a look at, you know, just our standard CAN configuration, our 2-line display. So there is a small coin cell battery that is on it. It's rechargeable. That's really nice. So after, you know, if we lost power, basically it lasts about a year, and really it's focused on just the clock. So there's nothing else that it's supporting, is really just the internal clock. So the one of the other pieces is the removal of the batteries, and we've gone to supercapacitors. So the reason we have supercapacitors is because we're using a Linux-based software, and Linux really likes to come down clean, just like any other operating system. If you shut down Windows too many times, it crashes and you'll get blue screens, and it just is not pretty. So we also want the same thing. So those supercapacitors are designed to hold the whole board for 1 minute so that the operating system can come down nice and clean and very smooth. So that's what those capacitors, they're no longer using batteries, which is great. Of course, reverse polarity protection now, we've done that almost everywhere, especially on the 485. We're protecting it up to 60 volts. That's really cool. And then I talked briefly about the database backup. And, you know, we're going to do a session on best practices, and we're going to talk about you know, what we should be doing with our ultras and our pros and how to keep them alive and, you know, and maintain them moving forward. But this feature is actually something we've taken into consideration based on all those things that we've learned from older controllers, which is every time the system boots up or shuts down during that 60-second cycle with the supercapacitors, it's going to be doing a backup. So that's really, really key. So every time it's doing that on both boot up and on power down. Next slide shows us a good comparison of the current Edge versus the new Edge G2. And really what it comes down to is we really wanted to make sure that it was a direct replacement for the current Edge. So you can remove current Edge today, take all the connectors off, put in a new G2, put all the connectors back on, and you're good to go. Simple database upgrade tool that we'll have available in version 2.8 SP1 will be there, and you'll be able to do an upgrade from an Edge to an Edge G2. We have all the same mounting holes, all the same locations. Everything is basically in the exact same spot. You'll notice the board is actually about 1/2 inch wider and about 1 inch longer, but we took that into consideration. You'll be able to use all the existing cans and back plates. Anything that we have today with the current Edge will be available in the G2. So we can answer some questions on the new Edge G2. We're really looking to get these out for Q3 of this year. I guess, are there any questions real quick? Carol?
Oops, sorry, I was on mute. Will the G2 still work off of ICU?
It will.
Go ahead.
In general, ICU is kind of fading into the distance. If you noticed on the more recent versions of it, we've taken away the ability to configure the controller through ICU. Basically, all it does is when you hit the edit button, it redirects you right into that controller's web page. And that's how we're doing the Edge G2. And that's mainly for cyber. We want you to go right to the, the trusted, authenticated web page of that controller to do the editing directly.
Yep.
Are both network ports PoE?
So the PoE controller has to be added. And what did you say, Rick?
Yeah, but well, even when you do, only port 1 becomes PoE. Port 2 is not PoE at all.
But yeah, you have to have the PoE controller board with it as well.
Right, for port 1.
Correct.
Are the Edge G2 relays socketed?
No, they are not.
No.
Will Edge G2 stop working during a firmware upgrade?
So what it does is during an upgrade, it will run off of its current existing firmware. So it runs kind of in parallel, and then it has to do a switch over. So it'll have to do kind of like a master reset.
Do the iSTAR Edge units need to be upgraded when going to 9,000?
So you have,
understand the.
well, this customer must have a Secure 800, God forbid, time to upgrade, right? And edges on the 800, they can be used with the older firmware rev. We would recommend upgrading. You know, it's not good to keep, 5-year-old firmware on any device these days. But yeah, those older edges could work on a 9000.
Yeah, the person just confirmed that that's what he meant.
Okay.
Right.
When does the iSTAR Edge G2 come out? When is it being launched?
So we're hoping for Q3 of this year. And that's really our expectations. You know, with this day and age today, we hope there won't be any delays, and we're pushing very hard for that to not happen. So that's that's really what I have for us now.
iSTAR Edge G2 looks to have 2 Wiegand inputs, but I thought it was a 4-door board.
Right, because we're all using OSTP these days, aren't we? And there's 4 dedicated OSTP ports. But yeah, kidding aside, we did only include the standard 2 Wiegand inputs. So to make it a 4-reader board, you'd have to add a 3rd and a 4th Wiegand port through RM4 devices, which you can mount on the inside of the door, just like the current Edge, 4-reader configuration.
Yeah, and if you look at the current picture that we have up, the second one is the Edge, and you can see where you mount them on the door, the connection points on the door, or the standoffs. So that leads us kind of into this. This is our family of controllers, and the Edge kind of rounds us off in that 4-reader configuration. So once again, we expect Edge in Q3 of this year. So we're really excited about it. The other piece is that it is only going to be the 4-reader configuration. We will no longer offer the 1 and the 2. So, which kind of leads us into this next piece, which is another flagship product, which is our TST100 reader. Sure.
Right. Again, this thing has been out about 1.5 years, but we're finally seeing a really strong uptake. Our industry is still considered fairly conservative. People want to try things out first and, put it on a customer's development system first and give it a second spin. But finally, we're seeing a lot of good activity in the touchscreen. It's a great reader. It's a nice upgrade. It gives you the nice 4.5-inch capacitive color touchscreen. It has the latest HID read head in it, so it does read the CIOS cards, even with the lead keys. It does procs, it does iClass. We do have a scrambled keypad option if you so desire to operate in a scrambled way, for a little extra security on your keypad entry. We even put in a speaker and a microphone for future intercom support. That's being planned, so you'd be able to, press the push to talk button, and it would start a SIP session over to one of the workstations. So Yeah, we're really seeing high uptake in office spaces, outside of conference rooms. Airports have been a good customer for these, and they do offer a nice way to arm and disarm intrusion zones. So customers that need intrusion zone functionality are tending towards this reader as well. So, it's all about the graphics. We have a nice new set of graphic displays for the reader. Here you see some of the access control situations you might run into, right? Card to be presented, card access granted, card rejected. Here's your keypad, here's your visitor escort features. Those all have separate icons. On the intrusion side, we have a set of icons as well, set of graphics. They do the full arm disarm functionality. So you have the area armed, all secure, exit now when you're starting to leave the building. It gives you that timer. Okay, and finally, it also gives you an indication of the alarms that are happening. If the door is held open, you get the yellow. If it's forced open, you get the red. If it's unlocked for the day from 9 to 5, for example, you get the bright green unlock symbol. Okay, so these are all part of the icon library. And the touchscreen actually has two personalities. So to get the graphic icons that I just went over, you have to put it into what we're calling smart mode. And currently that only works when you're connected to an IP ACM Ethernet door module. But as Greg mentioned before, the Edge G2 has the same full duplex RS-45 ports on the side. So you'll be able to put these right into an Edge G2. Okay, that's a nice encrypted protocol. And you can actually download firmware to the reader through the Ultra in that case. Okay. Now, for those that don't have IP ACMs, you can flip the diff switch and it goes into the RM mode. And it looks and feels like an RM reader. Okay, you can see the screen down here. It's designed to mimic what you currently see on the RM series of readers. Okay, in fact, it's the same mounting plate. So you could have a nice upgrade going on to replace some of those older RM readers with the new touchscreen. Okay, so again, it's just a little dip switch in the back that changes the personality. Oh, speaking of RM, the reader does have 2 inputs and 2 outputs on the back. So you could wire up, some local I/O, just like an RM device. So that's it for the touchscreen reader. Cheryl, do you have any questions?
Yep, I have lots of questions.
Okay.
When will the intercom feature be available?
Well, at this point, it looks like probably next summer. We have our 2.9 rev of Secure coming out this summer, and it's chock full already. So we're looking at the next major rev of Secure.
Does the TST100 work without Wi-Fi?
Yeah, the TST100 is a simple RS-45 reader, right? It just takes it takes 4 wires on the RM mode, right? 2 for data, 2 for power. And it'll take 6 wires on the smart mode, 2 for power and 4 for data. But it's just a wired up 45 port.
Will the TST100 reader support PIV SIV cards?
That is on our roadmap. Right now, it does not. We need to add that in. The HID read head, it does support those cards. It will take some work on our part to enable that. So for the time being, the answer is no, but it's being considered.
How durable is the touchscreen on the TST100? Is it weatherproof?
That's a good question. It is rated for IP54, indoor-outdoor rating. So it can withstand, occasional splashes of water. I wouldn't aim a garden hose at it. If you're going to use it outside, I'd also recommend putting like a awning or vestibule over it, because the glare, sometimes the glare, if it's right on there, you just can't see it. Just like your phone in the sun, right? Sometimes it just doesn't, view as well.
What about adding a mini cam to the TST100 for full intercom?
Now, that's a good idea as well. That's, again, on our hardware roadmap, right, Greg?
Yeah, that's already come up a few times, so that is on the roadmap.
Does the TST100 allow personnel photos to show when badged?
That is a good option as well that we've been considering. Right now it doesn't. Take a little work. But yeah, I guess that'd be good if you had a manned guard situation so that the guard could verify that the person that was using the card was the real person that owned the card.
Will Smart Mode be supported by direct contact to the iSTAR Ultra or iSTAR Ultra Edge G2? I'm sorry, iSTAR Edge G2.
Well, yeah, if you looked back on the Edge G2 drawing there, we did have 2 full duplex ports now on the sides of the controller. So yes, you could put a touchscreen right in there. And I guess, yeah, I suppose we could spill the beans here. We are doing a minor redesign of the Ultra ACM boards, the Ultra and Ultra SE ACM boards, and squeezing in a few full duplex ports on them as well. Won't see those until early next year, though.
That'll be 21.
Right.
All right, we'll take one more question because we're almost at the top of the hour. Will the TST100 connect to Mastermind or any other monitoring center software?
TST100. No. At this point, actually, what we are considering is adding OSDP support for the touchscreen. It's being considered. It's not in the immediate future, but that would allow it to be used on other systems besides iSTARs even. But the Mastermind software, you could have a higher level integration from a Secure system in, and that would, give you compatibility from the touchscreen into Mastermind. So if I did a command on the touchscreen, it could, send a message up to Mastermind that the system is armed, for example.
Okay,
so
looks like we're at the top of the hour. Again, this webinar is recorded, so I'll be sending out the recording along with PowerPoint after the webinar, and we'll be compiling any questions. I know we couldn't get to all the questions today, but we'll be putting together a FAQs doc that'll be sent out. Do you want to say a few more words, Rick, before we end?
Yeah, just thank everyone for the time. As you can hear, Greg and I are very passionate about the hardware. It is the meat and potatoes of your system here. It's the stuff that has to keep on working in the field and, keeping the doors opening when they should and closed otherwise, right? So as part of product management, we are constantly looking for new ideas and suggestions to help the products improve and to design the next product. So please, don't be shy and, get that feedback off to us.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.